After just one date with him in 2018, Arizona woman Jacqueline Adis allegedly sent a man over 159,000 texts over a 10-month span. Some of the texts were incredibly disturbing threats like, "I'd make sushi out of your kidneys and chopsticks out of your hand bones. I'd wear your fascia in the top of your skull and your hands and feet." Adis was later arrested for trespassing inside the man's home while he was out of the country, but she was later declared mentally incompetent to stand trial and the charges were dropped. This is the 2,000-year-old skull of Mary Magdalene on display at St. Maximin Basilica in France. It's considered to be one of the most precious relics in all of Christendom. In 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson drove his car into a ditch while driving home from a party. He called his parents and told them he was fine, but wasn't sure exactly where he was. Nearly 50 minutes into the call, he suddenly yelled, "Oh shit," and then went silent. He's never been seen nor heard from again. JFK's older brother Joseph most likely would have been the presidential candidate instead, but was killed in a top-secret flying mission during World War II. John once said that he never would have gotten into politics if his brother Joe had survived. In 2014, a Jamaican phone scammer threatened to kill a retired American man named William Webster when he wouldn't fall for his scam. But the scammer didn't know that Webster was the former director of both the FBI and the CIA. When he flew to New York City in 2017, he was immediately arrested and sentenced to 6 years in prison. In 1740, Ivan VI became Emperor of Russia when he was only 2 months old following the death of his Empress mother. Just 1 year into his reign, the baby was overthrown by his cousin and sent to prison. He spent the next 20 years of his life in solitary confinement without any of the guards knowing his true identity, before eventually being killed in a failed rescue attempt, as was the plan if he ever tried to escape. In 2018, an English woman was drinking out of a glass with a metal straw when she suddenly fell with the drink in her hand. Tragically, she landed directly on the straw, which punctured her eye socket and went through her brain, killing her almost instantly. For 4 decades, Walter Freeman, the man who made lobotomies popular, had personally performed as many as 4,000 lobotomies on patients as young as 12, despite never being professionally trained to perform surgeries. At least 100 of his patients died from cerebral hemorrhaging. For many years, Beethoven kept his hearing loss a secret since he was afraid that revealing his deafness would ruin his career. He once wrote a note to his brother that he never sent, confessing that he'd been completely deaf since the age of 40 and explaining that it had an immense impact on his social life. Since many people assumed he was antisocial, Beethoven longed for human contact but became a recluse out of shame. All of this resulted in severe depression and made the composer contemplate taking his own life. In 1986, 21-year-old Christopher Thomas Knight ran out of gas in rural Maine, entered the woods, and lived there for the next 27 years without human contact. He survived by committing over 1,000 burglaries against houses in the area to be able to endure the harsh winters of Maine. Knight was eventually captured by a game warden and sentenced to 7 months in jail, later vowing to live normally and to never steal again. In 1996, a stalker named Robert Dewey Hoskins told Madonna's assistants that he would slash her throat from ear to ear unless she married him. He then jumped the fence at the singer's home before being shot by a bodyguard, but survived and was arrested. Madonna would later testify against Hoskins in court, saying she felt sick to her stomach just being in the same room with him and had recurring nightmares about him chasing her. After being deemed highly psychotic and extremely violent, Hoskins was sent to a mental hospital, which he briefly escaped from in 2012. Just last year, a zookeeper from Uzbekistan was eaten alive while attempting to round up 3 lions that escaped from their enclosure. He apparently recorded the entire ordeal on his phone while attempting to impress his girlfriend, as his deathly screams could clearly be heard in the footage. Rescuers say they had no choice but to tranquilize 2 of the lions, while shooting the 3rd dead before finding the zookeeper's mangled remains. In 2013, a Swedish prisoner escaped from the facility because he had a severe toothache and was denied medical care. He broke out, saw a dentist who pulled out his tooth, and then turned himself back in. In 2009, Florida woman Carol Bryan received facial fillers that were mistakenly injected into the wrong spot, causing her forehead to swell up so severely that she went blind in one eye. Carol went from a fashion model to a recluse, refusing to leave her home for years due to the monstrous appearance of her face. Medical students in the UK were recently left astonished after the autopsy of a 78-year-old man. He unknowingly lived his whole life with 3 dicks, an extremely rare condition known as supernumerary penile formation. Polish adventurer Alexander Doba kayaked solo across the Atlantic 3 times, once at the age of 70. 4 years later, he reached the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, sat down for a break, fell asleep, and never woke up. In 2009, 2 women bet 28-year-old Russian man Sergei Tuganov $4,300 that he couldn't last 12 hours in bed with them. He won the bet, but later suffered a fatal heart attack after consuming an entire bottle of Viagra. An X-ray revealed that a 300-year-old Mexican statue of Jesus has real human teeth. They're believed to have been donated by worshippers as a way to get closer to the religious figure. After killing his girlfriend with a hatchet, 30-year-old Philadelphia man William Kemmler became the first person to be executed by electric chair. While it was supposed to demonstrate the effectiveness and humanity of electrocution, the punishment went horribly wrong. They underestimated the amount of electricity needed to quickly and painlessly end a man's life, so Kemmler was still conscious after the first shock. When physicians noticed he was still breathing in agony, they hit him with a second shock that was more powerful, causing his entire body to convulse violently and start smoking. Kemmler ended up with bubbling skin, melted eyes, and a foaming mouth, and the entire room reeked of burning flesh as many spectators ended up passing out from the horror. But despite this, the electric chair would still continue to be used for more than 100 years afterwards. Mark Gator Rogowski was one of the biggest stars in skateboarding throughout the 80s until he suffered a severe accident at a West Germany hotel. The skater fell from his window and landed on a fence, resulting in critical injuries including a broken neck. After his career quickly fell off and his girlfriend broke up with him, Rogowski raped and murdered one of his ex's friends and was sentenced to 31 years in prison. Earlier this month, Colombian police announced the arrest of a 22-year-old hitwoman known as The Doll. She had reportedly carried out several gang-related murders, including her ex-boyfriend, and was known for her expert handling of firearms. After witnessing mass murders at various concentration camps during the Holocaust, Nazi officer Kurt Gerstein tried to alert the world that the Holocaust was happening. In 1942, he made detailed reports to Swiss, Dutch, and Swedish diplomats, but they were largely ineffective. Gerstein ended up taking his own life in 1945. In 2001, actress Rebecca Gayheart struck and killed a 9-year-old boy who was attempting to cross the street. Other cars had stopped to allow the boy to cross, but she apparently lost her patience and drove into the turn lane to go around them, accidentally running the boy over in the process. She only received probation and a $2,800 fine. A Canadian man getting a rectal exam by his doctor at the hospital was observed by people he assumed were medical students. But he ended up suing the hospital and the observers after learning they were actors who played doctors on the TV show Saving Hope and were trying to prepare for their roles. A man from Alabama recently died after having the wrong organ removed during a horrific surgery in Florida. 70-year-old Bill Bryan was scheduled to have his spleen removed, but the surgeon mistakenly removed his liver instead. According to medical records, the surgeon didn't realize his mistake at the time and proceeded to label the removed liver specimen as spleen. Known for his historically cruel behavior, Roman Emperor Nero accidentally killed his pregnant wife by kicking her to death. He then found a young boy named Sporus who looked exactly like her, castrated him, then married him. Nero would call the boy by his deceased wife's name and dress him in women's clothing, while making his court play along with this disturbing act. The unsettling relationship would come to an end when Nero died in 68 AD, but this was only the beginning of the boy's suffering. For the next 3 Roman emperors, Sporus would serve as a royal sex slave. One of these horrible emperors, named Vitellius, planned on humiliating the boy in a public performance. In the middle of the gladiator games, Sporus would be graped in front of a stadium crowd as a reenactment of the Grape of Proserpina, after which he would be publicly executed. Upon hearing about this sinister plan, Sporus decided to end his own life at the young age of 19. In 2014, author Richard Britton traveled 500 miles to find a teenage girl who left him a bad review on his recent book, then smashed a wine bottle over her head, sending her to the hospital where she nearly died. Richard was jailed for 30 months following the vicious attack. In 1971, 46-year-old New Jersey accountant John List lost his job at a bank and couldn't stand to tell his family. After a failed job search, List worried that his family would turn away from God due to a lack of stability and therefore miss out on heaven. So he felt he was left with no choice but to murder his entire family and disappear forever. He killed his wife, mother, and 3 children by gunshot before vanishing for the next 18 years. List had planned out the murder so meticulously that nearly a month had passed before anyone suspected that something was wrong. He assumed a new identity in Denver, remarried, and evaded capture for nearly 2 decades, until a neighbor finally recognized him after seeing him on America's Most Wanted. In 2004, a deranged fan rushed the stage during the first song at a Pantera concert and fatally shot legendary guitarist Dimebag Darrell multiple times with a pistol. He then killed 3 others attempting to subdue him while injuring 3 more before being shot in the head by an officer. The killer's motive remains unclear to this day. During a live firing demonstration in 1942, a Royal Air Force pilot accidentally opened fire on a crowd of spectators. 25 British soldiers were killed while another 71 were wounded after being mistaken for dummies. After his floppy trouser snake was torn off in a car accident when he was 6 years old, 43-year-old Mohammed Abad received a fully functional bionic 8-inch pecker. It was constructed over a 3-year period using skin grafts and is complete with a mechanical interior and a fluid pouch to give him erections at the press of a button. According to the surgeons involved, its function is still complete enough for Abad to be able to father a child with his still intact right nut. When Carla Homolka met active serial rapist Paul Bernardo in 1987, they quickly formed a heinously criminal relationship. The pair would go on to grape and murder at least 3 young girls, including Carla's own little sister, Tammy. On Christmas Eve in 1990, Carla allegedly gave 15-year-old Tammy's virginity to Paul as a Christmas gift after drugging her with tranquilizers. Tammy ended up choking to death on her own vomit and died, after which Carla put on her deceased sister's clothes and proceeded to have intercourse with Paul on the girl's bed. Tammy's death was ruled an accident, and the couple went on to kidnap 2 more teenage girls, holding them captive for several days while abusing, sodomizing, and eventually killing them. When their crimes were uncovered, police found videotapes of the couple performing these heinous acts on their victims. Carla managed to negotiate a plea deal known as the Deal with the Devil in exchange for her testimony against Paul. He's now spending the rest of his life in prison, while Carla is happily remarried with children. Known for his legendary role of Cousin Eddie in the National Lampoon's Vacation movies, American actor Randy Quaid has faced a bevy of legal issues over the years. In 2009, he and his wife Evie were arrested for allegedly using a fake credit card to pay a $10,000 hotel bill. The next year, the couple was arrested again after spending 5 days in a guest house on a property they once owned in Cali. Facing felony vandalism charges, they fled to Canada seeking asylum, claiming they were gonna be murdered by a group of Hollywood star whackers. The couple was later detained by Canadian immigration officials but eventually released. They now permanently reside in Burlington, Vermont, and still maintain that they were victims of a dark Hollywood conspiracy. During the 2014 filming of Muppets Most Wanted, Danny Trejo's mom suddenly passed away. The actor managed to hold it together when everyone on set gave him their condolences. But when Kermit the Frog offered his own sympathies, Trejo ran to the bathroom bawling his eyes out. An Italian mafia hitman named Edgardo Greco killed 2 mob rivals with a crowbar before fleeing to France. He went on the run for more than 30 years until he was discovered working as a prestigious pizza chef. Greco's food became so famous thanks to his homemade recipes that he was featured in the local newspaper, resulting in his cover being blown. In 1991, 11-year-old California girl J.C. Duggard was abducted by convicted sex offender Philip Garrido while waiting for her school bus. Garrido kept J.C. handcuffed in various tents and sheds that he built in his backyard where he would consistently abuse her. 7 months into her captivity, Garrido introduced J.C. to his wife Nancy, who brought the child a stuffed animal and chocolate milk while tearfully apologizing to her but did nothing to free her. Instead, she helped her husband manipulate the young girl, at one point giving her 2 kittens before later taking them away. JC was eventually forced to bear a daughter at age 14 and another at 17, though she was never allowed to see a doctor. She remained missing for 18 years until a parole officer finally discovered her while investigating Garrido. He was sentenced to 431 years in prison, while his wife received 36 years to life. The state of California eventually awarded the Duggard family $20 million for its mishandling of the case. While working in his garage in 2012, Chicago man Dante Autolo accidentally shot a 3-inch nail directly into his skull. But he had no idea the nail had entered his brain until he started feeling nauseous 36 hours later, and a dozen doctors were completely stunned when they saw his x-rays. The nail was surgically removed and Dante miraculously made a full recovery. After his meth-addicted wife spread a false rumor that he was a pedophile, Australian father Bradley Lyons was kidnapped and attacked by a vigilante group of pedophile hunters. He was tortured with lighters and knuckle dusters and threatened with a shotgun in his mouth for not confessing to his crimes. At some point, the group poured hot water over Bradley's head and cut off his hand with a chainsaw since he continued to deny the false allegations. They then left him in the trunk of a hot car for 21 hours before executing him in the woods. Several people were sentenced to years in prison for the horrific murder, including Bradley's wife. In 1994, 13-year-old Texas boy Nicholas Barkley went missing after playing basketball with some friends. 3 years later, he was found in Spain and reunited with his family, but something was very off. The boy who came back had darker hair, brown eyes instead of blue, and a French accent, while looking much older than Nicholas would have been at the time. But perhaps blinded by grief, the Barkley family accepted this boy without question despite these major differences. To be fair, he claimed his kidnappers had taken him to France, dyed his hair, and changed his eye color to hide his identity. But a private investigator would soon reveal the boy's true identity as Frederick Bourdon, a 23-year-old Frenchman with a history of impersonating missing kids. Bourdon had apparently been searching for love and affection that he never received as a child. Known as the Chameleon, he's assumed over 500 false identities throughout his life, including those of orphans. Meanwhile, the true fate of Nicholas Barkley remains unknown to this day. This is one of the worst cases of Munchausen syndrome by proxy ever seen by doctors. For years, Kelly Ronahan was thought to be suffering from a mysterious illness that caused her to frequently lose blood and required weekly transfusions. But once doctors started catching on that Kelly was likely draining her own blood to appear anemic, she moved on to a new health issue. She allegedly started picking at her legs, putting chemicals on them, and rubbing all sorts of substances and dirt into the wounds. Soon enough, her legs got so bad that Kelly needed a muscle transplant and skin grafts to cover up the holes. After being discharged from the hospital, she continued picking at the scabs and causing further damage, eventually turning parts of her legs black. It got to the point where she nearly died from sepsis and required both of her legs to be amputated. Kelly gleefully documented her whole medical journey on social media, posting hundreds of photos and videos of her progress over the years. But in the end, she reportedly did it all for internet sympathy. Christine Palillo was a bullied outcast at school until two popular girls befriended her and gave her a makeover, helping her achieve the title of Miss Irresistible from her school's student body. But just a few months later, Christine and her drug addict boyfriend would end up brutally murdering the girls and two others in a botched drug deal. One of the girls tried desperately crawling to her phone after being shot in the groin, until Christine bashed her skull in with the butt of her revolver. Serial killer Dennis Rader used to install security systems for homeowners. Many of his clients wanted the security systems to keep the BTK killer from ever entering their homes, unaware that he was in fact the one installing them. In 2017, Glenna Durham killed her husband after shooting him 5 times. Soon afterwards, the couple's pet African gray parrot started repeating the words "don't effing shoot" in the husband's voice. These were assumed to be the husband's last words, and the woman was eventually found guilty of first-degree murder. Known for playing Donna's mom in That 70s Show, actress Tanya Roberts died from a severe UTI that advanced to sepsis and multi-organ failure. She first noticed the pain while out hiking one day and decided to sleep it off. But the next morning, Roberts fell out of bed in severe pain and couldn't get back up. She was quickly rushed to the hospital where she ended up dying 2 weeks later. In 2022, a 71-year-old cyclist named William Hoche was struck by an ambulance while riding his bike in Oregon, causing multiple injuries, including a fractured nose. The same ambulance brought him to the hospital, but later followed up with a bill for $1,800 for the ride. Hoche has since filed a lawsuit seeking just under $1 million. After a night out in 2016, 23-year-old Royal Air Force gunner Corey McKeague suddenly vanished. Security footage showed him entering a street, but never showed him exiting. Police eventually concluded that he fell asleep in a garbage bin and was crushed to death by a garbage truck. Corey's body was never found. In 2007, a 21-year-old man named Ben Carpenter, who suffers from muscular dystrophy, was pushed by a semi-truck for 4 miles after his wheelchair got stuck in the grill. Thankfully, officers heading in the opposite direction noticed the terrifying situation and stopped the driver before things got serious. Ben miraculously escaped without a scratch on him, but was traumatized by the incident. While filming for Gladiator, Oliver Reed died suddenly after challenging a group of sailors to a drinking contest at a bar. The actor consumed 8 pints of beer, 12 shots of rum, several shots of cognac, and an entire bottle of whiskey. He fell ill during the match and collapsed, dying of a heart attack in the ambulance en route to the hospital. It ended up costing the production company $3 million to recreate Reed's face with CGI, so he could appear in all the scenes that still needed to be filmed. Here's a photo taken by Challenger Deep of a beer bottle resting on the ocean floor 35,000 feet down, the deepest known point on the Earth's surface. This is the last known photo taken of Janet Johnson, a famous American mountaineer known for completing many difficult climbs throughout the world. She disappeared along with her friend John Cooper during a climb in 1973, until their bodies were found separately 2 years later, both wearing just one shoe and missing their ice picks. Cooper was found with a bloody wound on his stomach and a look of horror frozen on his face. Accordingly, several people, including examiners of the autopsy, believe that both Cooper and Johnson were murdered. The photo above was only discovered in 2020 when climbers found Janet's backpack and camera within the melting glacier. Nicknamed the Princess of R&B, popular singer Aaliyah lost her life in a tragic private plane crash when she was just 22 years old. Despite being warned that there was far too much wait for a safe flight, she and her entourage were eager to return home and demanded to leave immediately. Shortly after takeoff, the plane lost its balance and crashed just 200 feet from the runway, killing everyone on board. In 2013, the body of 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson was found inside of a rolled-up gym mat at his Georgia high school. Authorities later concluded that he had become trapped upside down while trying to retrieve his shoes, and eventually died from positional asphyxia. In 2002, schizophrenic British artist Richard Sumner entered a remote forest in Wales. He apparently handcuffed himself to a tree and threw the keys out of reach. His skeleton was found 3 years later, with evidence suggesting he likely regretted his decision.